Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from October 27th, 2023. I'm recording this on April 25th, 2024. As always, I give you those dates so you know when this information is actually most relevant because the market is always moving and changing. As you will see by the price differences of just 6 months with these books. Something could happen between now and when this video comes out on Saturday that might change some of these prices. As always, we're also looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. We use those two lists. We've been doing this for over 5 years now to see what books were moving in the market, why were they moving in the market, why were people chasing them, why were they jumping in value. And then we look back 6 months later to see how they've responded, how their market has responded since. Have those factors sustained those books? Have they fallen back? Should you have been patient? Should you have chased them in the moment? Generally, patience pays off if you're doing this, but not always. So we got 15 books to talk about this week between the two lists. Let's dig in and see what we can learn. First up, we got Ranger Stranger #1. They're hitting the list for the second time in about 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And basically, it was hitting the list because it was optioned by Kevin Hart's production company. Jumped up to a $10 to $12 book. It had been, which was basically the same price it was when it first hit the list the first time. Just had another bump in sales, that kind of thing. Now it's a $5 to $15 book, pretty steady around the $8 to $12 range. So overall, we're going to call this steady and I'll be back. Hasn't really dropped back in price, but you can definitely find an occasional deal. No real reason to have chased it in the moment for sure. Next, we have Jazz Legend #1. Supposedly this was optioned by Rooster Teeth for an animated series. This is a Scout comic. Those have not done well when been optioned, and then I think Rooster Teeth shut down, or there was something going on there since then. So I don't know if this has any future at all. Back then it was only going for $4 to $10 though, so I kind of said whatever. It didn't really wasn't much risk if you're paying under 10. Recently, nothing's really happened here. There's only one recent sale to report on, and it was for 3 copies, and it went for a total of $16. So you're figuring that's a little over $5 a pop. So yeah, that's the only sale since the beginning of March on this book. So not much going on here. Definitely a down and I'll be back. There was zero reason to chase this book. Next, we're going to start moving into our covers. Our first cover this week was Universal Monsters Dracula #1, the retailer thank you variant. As a reminder, these are usually perform about like a 1 in 25 in terms of my rules. And this one was going 30 to 55, so not between what would be ratio to double ratio on a 1 in 25 on this retailer thank you variant, which usually is not a good sign. This one performed worse than most. It is now a $10 to $20 book. 9.8 is only going 45 to 70. This is a dumpster fire. Yeah, if you paid $40, $50 for this and now it's a $15 book, yeah, that's not a good bet. And you didn't do very well on this one. So definitely came crashing back down for sure. Next, we have Marvel Zombies, Black, White, and Blood #1, the Del Otto 1 in 100 cover of Wolverine. Now, this one had a trade dress version. The 1 in 100 was the virgin version of this cover. That usually is a bad sign for 1 in 100, although getting all the way to 200 on a 1 in 100 is usually a good sign. This one was 2 to 250, but it did not hold. People just went and bought the trade dress for $5. It's now, there are only one recent raw sale. It was at 100. Only recent, the 9.8 sales are 140 to 170, less than what raw sales were going for 6 months ago. This is another dumpster fire. And again, the fact that there was a trade dress version usually hurts these quite a bit. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man #36, the Art Adams 1 in 25. But a ton of these Art Adams books that have hit the list, and they've actually done a little better than normal compared to most, depending on what they went for, but about, not quite, a little better than the rules, but not quite. This one was a $25 to $60 book, so it was between ratio and double ratio, which would mean going to end up around ratio, but this one is still like a $25 to $50 book, so it's kind of backed up a little bit. Not as, the top end is backed up a little bit. Only 65 to 80 though for 9.8, so yeah, you're almost better off just going on splurging for that 9.8 than trying to pay the high end of this for a raw copy for a really nice one. But yeah, we're going to call it steady, I'll be back. You could argue maybe down, I'll be back. But you'd be better off just being patient here. No reason to chase this book. Our last cover of the week is Void Rivals, number 5, the J. Lee 1 in 50 spoiler variant. I'm not 100% sure exactly what this is spoiling. I haven't been reading the series, but this was kind of the wrap-up of the Void Rivals before we got Transformers and G.I. Joe books. 80 to 115 back then for this 1 in 50. So sitting right around double ratio, not a good sign, even on a 1 in 50. Now it's a $30 to $50 book, so below ratio. That's another dumpster fire. So 3 of our 4 covers this week were dumpster fires. Not a great performance if you were chasing the hot covers of the week. Next, we're going to jump into Comic Buzz, and we got G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, number 1. And this is basically who's hitting the list because Skybound had officially announced like we were getting a Duke and all the different G.I. Joe Cobra Commander series, and that we were going to get new Joe series as part of this new Energon universe. Back then, high-grade raw copies were going for $250 to $280, 9.8, 800 to 1,000, excuse me, 800 to 1,000, not 80 to 1,000. That was for the non-newsstand. That was just the direct. Now, raw copies $50 to $320, so I'm giving you the full range. So the high-grade are still right around what they were before. Maybe there's only one sale over 300, so that went up to that 320. So really right around the same price there on the high-grade raws. 9.8, 7 to 950, so they've kind of backed up just slightly. Newsstands are going 12 to 1,500. I just threw those in because there were several newsstand sales that were kind of right there. So overall, we're going to call it steady, and I'll be back. You can argue steady and worth it, but yeah, it's right around the same price. You can find a few deals if you were patient and pick your spots. All right, next we have Secret Wars number 8, the origin of the black suit. And basically we were coming up on the 40th anniversary of Secret Wars. We knew we were going to get the facsimiles. We've been getting all those for the Secret Wars books. And so also the 40th anniversary of the black suit. So that's why this was hitting the list. Raw copies back then, 200 plus, 9.8, 600. For high grade raws, I should say 200 plus, 9.8, 600. Now it's a $50 to $200 book, 9.8, 450 to 550. So a very slight step back here on this book. We'll call this another down and then I'll be back. Overall, like long term, you'll probably get anything lost here back. This is a book that's got enough. People love Venom and the black suit and all this stuff enough. This is a book that's never going to drop too much. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 252, the first appearance of the black suit. Same reason, hitting the list. Raw copies back then, 250 on the high end. A 9.8 Canadian price variant went for 4,200. I think that was really why they're putting it on the list, because it was so much higher than normal. Now, raw copy 50 to 250. So basically, they're probably about the same as it was back then. Regular 9.8s right now are 11 to 1,700. So again, right around where it's kind of been setting for the most part. But the Canadian variant now, the most recent one of those was 3,250. So that's a pretty dramatic step back. Overall, we're going to call this a down, and I'll be back. Again, it's a very slight step back here over the last 6 months, but a book that long term is probably just worth it. You're probably fine. But you could have gotten some deals if you were patient. All right, a couple of seasonal books. I'm not sure why this first one's really seasonal, but that's what they were doing. Basically, we got Amazing Spider-Man number 14, the first appearance of Hallows' Eve. And this was getting a seasonal bump because they were releasing a Halloween seasonal one-shot, and she was being featured in it. So that's kind of where this is coming from. Raw copy back then was going for $8, so double cover. 9.8 was only at $55, so not a lot going on here back then. Now it's a $4 to $15 for this first appearance as the character as Hallows' Eve. It's not Jane's first appearance. 9.8, 40 to 80. So, I mean, steady, worth it. Steady, I'll be back. You can find some deals, so it's probably just I'll be back. But yeah, it really hasn't moved any. I mean, it's a low-end key. That's it's a key book, but not a lot of interest in it, so it stays just above basically cover price and just above the price to actually slab it. Pretty typical. Next, we have Marvel Premiere number 50, the first appearance of Alice Cooper in comics. And this was hitting the list because supposedly there was a new Dynamite book coming related to Alice Cooper, something from Rodney Barnes. I don't know. I didn't quite understand exactly and I didn't go back and rewatch the video. My notes weren't 100% clear here, but raw copies were 20 to 60 back then. 9.6, 124. Now raw copy is 10 to 40, and 9.8, 150 to 190. Or no, that's a 9.6. I didn't change that in my writing, which means it's wrong on the slide too. But 9.6s were 150 to 190, just the two sales. But we're going to call this down, and I'll be back, because the vast majority of sales are raw copies, and they were down, even though the 9.8s or 9.6s were a little higher than they were back then, but only two sales. Next, we have NYX No. 4, the second appearance of Laura Kinney. Back then, raw copies were going for 65, 9.8 going for 335 to 550, and this was all based on rumors she was going to be in Deadpool. Again, that Daphne Keane was coming back. We'll see here in just a couple months. Hope so. She's a character I wouldn't mind seeing get a cameo. Raw copies now 20 to 75, 9.8 2 to 300. So this is a trap compared to the prices back then on the 9.8 side for sure. And really, for the most part, it's backed up on the raw side as well. There are a couple sales up around that $65 average they had before, but the vast majority of them are under 50. All right, just 3 books left, and we got Fantastic Four, number 244, first appearance of Nova, Frankie Reyes. And this was based off the rumors we were getting a female Herald for the Fantastic Four movie. And since we know that's not going to be Frankie Reyes, but hasn't seen a whole lot of change yet in the value of the book. We'll get into in a second. But yeah, so anybody specking on Nova, this didn't quite work out. Back then, raw copies were 25 to 55, 9.8, 406. Now they're 5 to 50, 9.8, 225 to 400. But I'm going over the last few weeks. There really hasn't been many sales since the news came out. We haven't really seen, so we probably haven't really seen the drop off that's going to result from the fact that it appears the female Herald is going to be Shia LaBeouf and not Frankie Reyes. So yeah, the prices, this book had been pretty steady leading up to this, but it just started taking a few steps back over the last month, and now, yeah, it's going to probably crash from here, but still just a down, and I'll be back to this point, but not looking good for getting your money back on this one going forward. Next, we have Avengers Annual number 21, the first appearance of Victor Timely, and this is maybe the biggest fail ever in terms of the spec market. I mean, we've had a lot of fails. This is a big one. Back when Ant-Man came out and we got the tease for Victor Timely, this was once a 9.8, way up between $400 or $500. I guess the White Vision might be worse, but this is just a bad one, I guess. Maybe not the worst, but a bad one. By 6 months ago, it was hot because it was back up to a $155 9.8. Raw copies were back up to 20 when at one point they were pushing $50, $60, $100. I mean, it kind of got stupid. Now it's a $1 to $10 book raw, 9.8, 50. Still it was a dumpster fire 6 months ago from the previous heights. It's a dumpster fire now from 6 months ago. Yeah, this is just not a book that was worth, between his legal troubles and just, yeah, this is just not a book that worked out at all. Next, we have Avengers number 8, first appearance of Kang the Conqueror. Obviously, both of these had to do with the Loki show starting. Raw copies 2 to 700 back then, 5.0, 500. Right now, raw copies are about the same, $100 to $700 for raw copies. 4.0, 350 to 450, 6.5, 7 to 850. No recent 5.0 sales, that's why I just kind of gave you both sides of it. That had multiple sales, grades around it that had multiple sales. Overall, steady, and I'll be back. Hasn't been a lot of change in this book, despite everything. This is just a key that's worth enough that it's kind of, but I would guess we're probably on the very low end. This is probably a decent time to buy in still. It may take a little bit further toward we may not quite be to the floor, but I kind of think we're probably pretty close to the floor on this book. So, just my thoughts. Who knows? It may back up a little more, but I can't imagine it backing up much more. All right. With that is this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching. I'm going to go watch the draft. Hopefully my Chiefs do something interesting tonight. Probably not, but and we will catch you guys next time. Later.